number 7 need to be learning this. And then we wouldn't have anxiety, confusion, fear, depression. You know, tribal cultures, those things aren't even real things, you know?
The following is a conversation with Belinda Jane, author, therapist, mentor, and the founder of the Elements of Life, her simply sacred system for accelerated personal growth. In this episode, we discuss energy as the universal life force and rethink energy as the core element of life as it relates to love, money, and time. Join us in this fascinating quest for truth and authenticity across the vast and turbulent ocean of human consciousness. I'm Ronnie Ruhlman. These are the Sacred Sessions. Belinda Jane, here we are again. How cool. I'm so excited about today. Energy. We started with money, sacred money. Time was just very cool, and it took us into places that I wasn't expecting, as our discussions do. And for the audience, we don't rehearse these conversations, and that's what makes them, I think, so compelling, because they are, they're spontaneous. I'm sure Belinda Jane's just channeling from another dimension, and I'm purely the messenger. Energy. I'm so excited about energy because it's a continuation of the thread that we've been talking about, this golden thread, and it's starting to make so much sense to me, which sounds like a paradox. I've done your work and I continue to do your work. It sounds like a paradox, but to me, to see it in this context and to try and explain it to people in a simplistic way, I'm seeing the work differently. So the golden thread that goes through the pillars of the elements of life: money, time, energy, love. Today we talk about energy, and when I was thinking about energy, of course, a famous quote comes to mind of the 20th century physicist, one of the greatest human beings we've ever known, Albert Einstein, whose groundbreaking discoveries sort of bridge the gap between science and God, if you will. But he talked about energy as being neither can you create energy nor can you destroy it. And when I researched that, he went on to say that everything is energy. And he's never quoted as saying that. Mm. And he then goes on to say, this is not a philosophy, this is physics. Mm. And the scientific community don't ever quote that. They only quote the bits that he wants you to know about. And interestingly, when I read further into that presentation of his, one of his last dissertations, he also talked about time as not existing. Yep. And being an illusion of our reality, which is something that, of course, you and I talked about that in the last podcast. So to all the scientists out there, that the time-space continuum is a furphy. It's an illusion that we exist in. Mm. So, with that said, and energy being the thread, go for it.
Well, it's really interesting because, as you know, before we sit to do these sacred sessions, I contemplate exactly how best to approach it and to share it so that people get a really, first of all, an initial understanding of the work, but also something that resonates with them. And what is that that's resonating with them is the energy, right? The energy, the feeling of it. How does that feel for someone is the energy, the frequency, the frequently felt. Where are they, right? And what came to me is in the manuscript that I've written, I thought, well, why don't I just read a little bit from that to give people an idea exactly what, because it's really basic, what we say, how we work with it within our system is best approached by the book that I wrote. So Energy is God force, life source. It is love and it is nature. As the infinity symbol shows us, you receive precisely what you put out into the world. This is a sacred and special thing. You own this pillar too. It is yours. You choose who you are and who you want to be by your relationship and recognition, acknowledgement and placement of it. Just the same as the money pillar, so too with time. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It simply changes form in alignment with your frequency or frequently felt. It's really funny when we were talking about that before we went to air. When my daughter was helping me edit this book, she said, I thought they were your words, because I've always said it to them, right? So now you've dobbed me in. Thanks, Albert.
It's like discovering Santa Claus doesn't exist.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, wasn't you, Mum? They weren't your words. We thought that was so clever.
Yeah, but how lofty to be aligned with the greatness of Albert Einstein.
Yeah. I think, we all kind of merge in consciousness at some point, but in science at school, we used to have these things called, I don't know if you did a ripple tank. Do you remember the ripple tank? It was like water in a big square dish. And what we did was drop a smooth pebble into the ripple tank, and you watched how the waves go out and touch the side, and then the frequency, and then it comes back in, touches the pebble and goes back out again in waves, right? Frequency waves.
And they cross over and create more and more.
Yeah. So imagine dropping a smooth pebble into a shallow water tank. On the periphery exists your intimate relationship, your family, and your purpose and passion in equal thirds, just like a peace sign. As you watch the ripples come from that pebble, recognize these as your feelings, as being the vibration and frequency resonating out into the world. So it doesn't just stop at the end of the ripple tank. Of course, it continues on, the ripple effect, right? Affecting not only your cells and then your life, but everything and everyone around you. Your family and the energy in your home, your children, your parents, your pets, your ancestors. And we have a heart that is at the center, and that is you breathing and smiling and being mindful. That then is the stone you cast into that ripple tank of life's longing for itself.
Yeah, life's longing for itself. That's a beautiful concept. There are a couple of things there that come to mind. As you were speaking, this rippling effect. Carl Jung referred to the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
It's a big concept, but we can bring it down. I've seen it in a family that I'm close to, when there's disharmony with dad. So the man of the house is having a personally challenging time with his estranged father, but I've been witnessing this, how that resonates through the children, through his wife, and so on. And it's sort of a trusted insight into that group. It's been interesting to observe that. It's exactly as you say. So it doesn't. So if we drop, if we are the centre of our own system of energy, this rippling out, it doesn't just end with our container. It continues on. So that's interesting, isn't it? Is that why some people come into the room and they kind of seem to light the place up, or why other people come into a room and you want to avoid them?
It's really great to bring that up, because I'll often say to clients, when they're speaking about separating, or they're speaking about they're having trouble in their marriage, but the children never hear us argue. They've never heard us fight. And I say, have you ever been to a party where you walk in and the husband and wife have been arguing? You may not have heard the argument, but you can cut through the energy and the feeling in that room with a knife.
Comes back to what you said earlier, feeling. So feeling is a frequency.
Yeah.
So, and I know a lot of people would say that's BS, but it's true, isn't it? It's an intuition. So that frequency, we can almost see it.
Yeah. And we only use such a small part of our brain. The other part of our brain that we don't use is picking up on that all of the time. So that's why we do have a responsibility. How do we go into something? Are we going into it and bringing it something or a frequency that's up, where we know the God particle is in frequency, which is compassion and forgiveness and loving allowance and complimenting, encouraging, like the list goes on. So frequency can bring you up in your energy, or you bring frequency up in your energy. You're the center of it, so better said. Or are you going to come in with dissension and down and criticism and judgment and blame and shame, and then imagine that doesn't just affect, be it not just a child, which they're the ones affected the most by that frequency, but a work situation, parents, partners, anything that you go through in life carries with it you're the significant influencer through the energy that you bring. And it's completely in your control. When I first started practice, and people would say, what do you mean by energy? And I was a little bit more cautious. I know you don't agree that I was a little bit more cautious, but I actually believe I was. That's what I tell myself. And the infinity symbol was there, and so I would speak to well-being, or I would speak to health. How well do you sleep? I would look at the indicators that we're taught, at university to watch for in people, I guess their well-being, how well they are. And that to me, I guess, was the first flaw. And then as I got more confident in explaining or exposing what I knew to be true, then it became more multidimensional. Then it was about your ability to respond, to recognizing where and how your energy is impacting yourself, your cell, your soul, your psyche. This is your energy center. This is the way that you speak in the world, whether you use your words for it or not, right? So that's why it's such a significant one.
Yeah, wow. Well, a couple of things there, which I wanted to touch on. So words are very powerful in terms of their energy, their intent, the way they're delivered, the way they land, the hurt they cause. That's the way we communicate. I suppose there's an energy behind that, isn't there?
Always.
So we speak, we can hear, we perceive, we understand, but it's the energy, it's the unseen that is the thing that often causes the hurt, isn't it?
And it creates the change as well. Again, we were speaking earlier about whether things are aligned or divinely designed. If you're really in your perfect self-expression in any given situation, the energy flows really easily and people pick up on it. It's like a confidence, a self-confidence. And those people are easier to be around than people that feel inadequate or not self-assured, or they feel lacking, and that their energy is a little bit fractured and fragmented, which I go to speak, further in the book about that. And it's not a bad thing. It just, there's a comfort and flow in one, the energy, the frequency, and the other one you feel like you have to jump in or help or save or fix, or you tend to be a little bit more jagged, or they tend to be a little bit more jagged in their energy. And eventually, through our work, what happens is people find, and I love it when they say this, I feel like I can go low and slow, and I feel really smooth with myself now. And it only makes sense really when you feel what it's like to feel smooth with yourself. It's self-confidence, right? It's I'm comfortable now in my own skin. I'm comfortable with a sense of being. You've spoken to it before, rather than having to do. You do with your energy as well. But that was the one I think notoriously we've focused on, the doing, what you do with your energy. But I feel it's really important that we start to have people comfortable with their way of being in their energy. Like you said, why? Why do they come at it from this place and space? What is it within their energy flowing through themselves that they're not comfortable with? And they're the really beautiful and big questions. They're nothing to shy away from. They're actually the most important questions you can ask. Why are you comfortable? Why are you not comfortable? Would you prefer and rather be more comfortable? What are the stepping stones that we need to lay down now in order for that to be true for you?
Well, self-awareness.
Yeah.
I particularly find with a lot of men, they've never asked themselves. They've never, it's a foreign concept. I don't know. I can't categorise that with women. I have a feeling that women are more attuned to the way they feel, or their frequency, or their energy. I know and have known in my time numerous men suffering from depression.
which is disconnected energy, right?
It's
That's all it is.
It's disconnected energy. So
Yeah.
disconnected. I was
They're
thinking
from
of it as a very low sort of a
low frequency because
low
they're
frequency.
disconnected to their God particle, to the highest part. They're disconnected from it. And no one's really said to them, again, it's considered a pathology rather than a disconnection. And that's a great misleading concept in mental health and well-being. I know to be true. It's not a belief anymore for me. When you speak to women and men, women tend to find their answers and find it more easily accessed internally because, you know, we have our cycle every month. We have that wave is lived within our psyche and our cells and our soul every single month. You know, we have the 4 seasons really in 4 weeks. So we need to learn to ride those waves at 12 years old. So if you learn to drop into those times in a woman's life, what she does is she can get a lot of her answers through those beautiful natural rhythms and cycles. If she doesn't, she tends to disconnect from it and goes down where the men go too, right? When you find a man looking for himself, he'll tend to go externally. The yang of nature, of gender, will be very much about penetration, direction, waste. Putting, you know, if you think about an egg and a sperm, an egg for a woman is inside her grandmother, right? So the egg of that woman went, of course, through her mother, was in the ovary in the grandmother, so of the mother in the grandmother. So the woman is born with all of her eggs. So every month, of course, she releases an egg. So she's self-contained. She doesn't need to do anything else but drop inside. The man, he's the creator of sperm, obviously. Like, it's such a simplistic way of looking at it. So the woman, self-contained, the vessel, carrying creativity. The male, penetrate, direct, and waste. The sex act is the perfect example of what happens between the energy of the two. And he makes sperm, wastes it, makes sperm, wastes it, makes sperm, wastes it. She's just there quietly carrying. And I feel like once I explain that to people and I go, this is the nature of things, you know, whether we like to acknowledge it, physiology, biology, but it is the nature of energy as well, that yin and yang and male and female.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I haven't ever come across it, even in your work, have it be explained like that. So,
because I'm old and brave now. I just told you last time I have no fear.
Yeah. It's brilliant. Circling back to depression, though, it's a paradox, isn't it? So if you're saying it's disconnected energy, how do you reconnect it? How do you...
To recognise you have it.
Self-awareness, right?
Yeah, to recognise that you are energy first.
Yeah.
And that, again, it's a sacred thing. It's a God particle. It's something that won't be like anybody else's. I feel children under 7 need to be learning this. And then we wouldn't have anxiety, confusion, fear, depression. You know, tribal cultures, those things aren't even real things. You know? It's in our life of disconnection, of indoctrination, of everything being about the outside rather than the connection inside. I mean, we have started to get some modules of mindfulness and things like that at schools, but they're quite minimal compared to the rest of the, you know, the things that they're taught. The curriculum is very lacking in the humanities, how to be human, which is actually what we came for. We didn't really learn, we didn't come to life to learn the other things that they get over those 12, 13 years, really. That's another whole podcast, how I feel about the education system. But if I ever, and often I have, as you know, worked with young men that have wanted to take their lives, 10 out of 10 times, they don't know what I'm talking about when I speak to their energy. They've gone down to that deep, dark place. They've touched and hit rock bottom, and they don't want to put their feet on the ground and push back up. And then they go into hypnotic and they find a way. And I will often even give them the feeling, or they give themselves the feeling certainly, but I will give them the opportunity to imagine that they did take their own life, right? That this is what happened.
Wow.
And then at your funeral, how does this feel? How does your mother feel? How do you feel? And most of them are nearly screaming, it was a mistake, I didn't want to do that, you know? Because where the frontal lobe of your brain or your mind is at that age and stage is pretty much in the moment. It's not really that experienced with cause and effect. So to show them, if this happens, you could land and be a quadriplegic. You don't necessarily die, right? And that none of the boys want that. So you actually see and view their wholeness from the point of the choices that they make for their energy in motion, for their frequency.
Well, that's really the magic of the hypnotic is, and that's the wrong word, but it's the holiness of where you go in the hypnotic. Not dissimilar to what meditators feel, but more effective in my personal experience. And you go to that place, and of course they're going to realise the error because it's not their truth. Because when you go into the hypnotic, you're connecting with your authenticity, and you're cutting through the illusion of who you are. You're cutting through the persona that you've been told and taught, and the narrative that you've bought into, which we've discussed. So that makes a lot of sense to me. The idea that you can do that, and that leads into my next question. How do you, or what might you say to someone who's not benefiting from the gift of hypnotic right now, who's feeling that way? It's a conundrum, isn't it? You can't say, how do you take yourself out of that place, because you don't. If you did, you wouldn't be there, right?
But
so,
you know what?
So it's a paradox. What do you do?
You don't take yourself out of that place.
What do you do?
You allow yourself to be in that place. You make it a real place. You give it its value. You don't medicate it. You don't label it. You allow yourself to be there to the point where you've suffered enough and you're ready to change it, right? Whereas when what happens a lot of the time is people create personalities around the place that they are. And I say to my young boys I work with, this is a moment in time. Because as I said earlier, they haven't had enough experience to know that this too shall pass, which you can say to an older person. It makes very little sense to somebody sort of under 30 probably, that this is a moment in time. And please just sit in it, allow yourself to feel it, and to not want to shake them out or push them out, get them through it, because then they've not felt truly what they're there for. And what they're truly there for is to recognise that there is a disconnection. Yeah, that life force that we were speaking about, that God particle to generate, organise and deliver their highest good is not, the circuit is not on. They're not connected to it. The second they become connected to it, or at least even know that exists for them, is a possibility for them, everything changes.
I have a great belief in this idea of that everything sort of starts with and centres around acceptance. Because by acceptance, and this is only through my own sort of life path and adversity and so on, that once you accept the situation, you know my views on this, you're no longer a victim.
Yeah.
And so you're starting to command that moment for yourself, and you're saying that. So could you frame it that would be viable to say, so to stay in that moment rather than feeling miserable, feeling sorry for yourself, and the world hates me and I'm hopeless, and I had a conversation only last week with someone who says, I'm everyone thinks I'm fucking useless, and I said, no, only you think that. That's because I've never heard anybody speak of you in those terms. And in fact, you were in a circle saying to this close friend of mine, you're in a circle, thinks very highly of you. So is that the disconnect you're talking about?
Yeah.
Is that an example of that, of being so disconnected that you feel in that low frequency existence?
There's two things. You don't stand a chance there if you are the victim of other people's circumstance. So if you believe that someone else has made you feel that way, then there's an issue and a problem. So our work is very much about empowering people to say you have a choice, right? Once they recognise, if I had a choice to get here, then I must have had a choice to move out of this, right? So that's a really important there. The victim mentality is something that will always allow you to be stuck. Because if it's not your responsibility to get in or to get out, if it's waiting on something and someone else, then there you stay. Because that's the most, probably in my practice, in our work, the most disempowering position anyone can put themselves in and remain in. So unless they're ready and they've suffered enough because no one's dragged them out or they haven't medicated it, we've allowed them to feel the grief that is often there. I feel like what needs to happen is that we educate culture and society to not shy away from those deeper, darker emotional places. To actually say 50% of the time, things are going to be much harder than they are the other 50% of the time. If we taught little kids that, then they wouldn't go in with that. We were talking about happy the other day. It's like, it's not all about being happy. It's all about everything. Energy is all about everything. And your placement in that is your choice. If they learn that, it's a completely different game they play in life then.
Oh, so cool. I've taught my children from a very young age about resilience. As you know, I came to be a father later in life, 49, for anyone who missed the other episode. And it's not on Wikipedia. But resilience to me, and I was chatting with my daughter the other day who was having some pushback about school camp. Resilience it's so important for us to be resilient. Like I said, I can't rescue you from this fear that doesn't exist. It hasn't happened, and it's just and you're making it such a big thing in your mind right now, and I can't rescue you from that.
No, but the thing about that fear, you feel the acronym of it, the false evidence appearing real, which I also love, and I don't know who I can dedicate and commit that to, but it's certainly not mine. False evidence or energy for the podcast, appearing real.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So, but it's still for their inner child, which is your energy and motion, your body, viscerally, how you're feeling about it. It is a real thing in that moment. So we never dishonour or discredit that. We say, yeah, you do. You feel afraid right now and you're allowed to be afraid. For you, this is fearful, and I completely understand. And that's what I was saying. So in that case, it would be, let's sit here. I'll sit with you in that. The same as when my boys come to and they just want to give up on life, I'll sit with them in that. Tell me how that feels.
Of course. That's an important distinction. And I'm not a psychologist, and I don't pretend to be even a pseudo-psychologist. I'm a facilitator, I'm a messenger. But when I'm speaking with friends, generally they come to me when they're in need, as they should.
Yeah.
Or my children. I never minimise that. I think it's so important because it is real. At that moment in time, what that person is feeling is their reality. And I think it must be approached through compassion.
And respect.
Total respect.
And choice. So if you can give them compassion and you can give them respect and gently move them with loving allowance to choice, then the game's won.
Choice is a hard one. I've been wanting to talk to you more about this. We touch on it, but you must get so much pushback from clients around the idea that they have made a choice that has brought them into your room. That they've made a choice or choices or a cascade of choices that have created the reality that they are now so desperately trying to get out of. Can you speak about that?
I would say to them always, if it wasn't you, who was it?
Perfect.
Who did make that choice? Who did choose that man? Who did choose to live there? Who did choose this, that? Who was it? And often they'll hark back to, and they always tell their own story and then bring their own answer, which is why I love the work so much. When someone's sitting there in that safe space, right? Sacred, safe space. And they're able, you watch almost the penny drop or the light bulb go on as they unfold their very own story, and they recognise, that's something my dad did, or that's something that I saw such and such, but you can have two children in the one family, same parents, same home, around the same energy, and one's energy and motion, personality type just is quite distinct from the other one, which says that we all have that unique particle of God and life force that we carry. It's not just a victim of circumstance.
Yeah,
right?
I heard this morning driving over here, I was listening to a podcast. It's so long I listened to it in bits. So Chris Williams, and he jumped up and he made the comment that he talked about therapy. It came out of nowhere, and he defined therapy as being these rooms that we go into that we didn't know existed.
Yeah, completely.
And
They're
I've never thought of
caves.
therapy like that. So within us, that's right, because who he was speaking to was talking about, he discovered a room in his house, had been there for decades, and there was a cavity in the wall, and no one had ever bothered to go there. And he said, and he stopped. He said, "That's therapy," and which is kind of what you're what I heard you just say when you get people coming full circle, that moment, that oh wow moment in therapy.
Yeah.
Where they've just walked into a room they didn't know existed, and then they realise that it isn't about anybody else other than themselves.
And they've built the other rooms around that room is the really important thing.
That's really cool. They've built the other rooms around that room.
And that was the room they wanted to look at the least, and it was the one where all their power was.
That's a great thought experiment. So you could say they built the rooms around this room that they didn't want to go into, and then those rooms they decorated to their liking.
Yeah.
Right, but so in other words, they're cladding the room that they don't want to go into.
Yeah, and once you go into that deep, dark place, once you go into that room that you're afraid of, you recognise that's where my energy is. That's where my power is. That's why I feel so drained. That's why I feel so isolated, alone, unloved, uncared for, because I'm sitting alone in that room, right?
Talk to me about why we feel the energy, why we feel energy. Is it that someone or something is draining us?
It's about teaching us self-acceptance, that we all we have biorhythmic, each individual has biorhythms. We have a rhythmic way that life works through our cells. And if we're connected to it and aligned with it, then we have a downtime. What do? We rest. Like I say to my clients, then that's the time that you rest, rather than, I need more energy now, I need to take this supplement, or I need to do more of this or take more of that. It's just, why don't we just self-accept that, like all seasons, everything changes, and that there are down times and that there are up times, and neither one is good nor bad. They're just the things that happen, right? If someone is constantly fatigued, that's a different issue, because that's the first sign that someone's really unwell, whether it be mentally, emotionally unwell, whether it be physically unwell. Fatigue is our first sign that something is diseased, right? So that's a different thing. That's when you never move out of being completely exhausted all the time. It's a precursor to something being seriously wrong. But actually just the rhythmic flow of life, the different seasons of life, or the different seasons of a day. You know me, like I'm up at 5 a.m. By sort of 12, 1 o'clock, I just want my own time and space, right? I wind down then, because that's just how I operate best, right? As I became an older woman, rather than pretend that wasn't who I was and to still try and push through it, I just go, this feels right to me. This feels that aligned divinely design that we always talk about. This is when I'll do the big things, the heavy lifting in the day is, intellectually, certainly from 5 to 7 o'clock in the morning is when I do a lot of my writing. Then I do practical things. Then I do marketing and shopping and around the house and serving, contributing. And then, as I said, I'll have a wind down, a more contemplative time in the afternoon. So that's the way my biorhythm activates. Then there's other people that are night owls that just love that 10 to 12. That's when they're really on fire. And I have a lot of my clients that study really well in that time. So I guess the acceptance that everyone's energy and motion and flow through their psyche and their body and their ability to be is really different and diverse, and it's supposed to be. We're all these unique little particles of God and life force, and that loving allowance and acceptance, well, that's not like me, is actually a beautiful thing. It's compassion, but it's also about, for the self, it's about acceptance.
I think you've just described a really well a biometric definition of energy. But what about the esoteric expression of our mind? For example, you work with, as a therapist, with lots of people. You don't know who's coming in the door and what they're bringing. After that 45 minutes or so, they walk out feeling great. How do you feel? Do you ever feel depleted?
No, not anymore.
When you were younger?
When I was younger, I did 5, I see clients for an hour and a half, so I would do 5 of those a day for 5 days a week. So I would have to say that then I couldn't have gone out and spoken anywhere. I would just stare at a wall and unwind then. But because my energy and life force was in a different place then, and I was wanting to save up to buy a house for my children. Like I was motivated by different energy and different things and wanted a different outcome. Now that I've reached more of an arrival position, I guess I feel and utilise and spend my energy differently. But, in answer to your question, when someone walks in now, I can feel through experience and through watching thousands and thousands of people, I can feel where they are. And that's quite a beautiful thing. And I can sit down with them and I feel as though I already know them. And it's wonderful.
I've experienced this. You walk out of here just floating. You're in a different energy. You come in feeling defeated, utterly defeated. And an hour and a half later, you're walking out of here. Time seems to have stopped. I think you made a reference to some clients saying that felt like 5 minutes. And then they feel so much lighter. What have they actually experienced at that moment?
A shift in their frequency and the recognition that just like our other pillars, energy is a currency. It's something that how are they spending it on themselves is the first question that I'll ask them. What are you doing with your energy internal? So we look at the infinity symbol, right? As I put out, so I get back. And then what are they giving, bleeding, putting out that they're not getting anything back into the outside world? So it's a where they're putting their attention, isn't it? It's a focus. It's a focused awareness. It's a currency. Where am I spending this?
It's brilliant. It's this is now weaving so beautifully into the energy of money, the energy of time. So the thread is moving through. It's that tension between the finite and the infinite.
Well, going back to time, it's because actually time happens on a spiral rather than in linear time. And quantum physics teaches that it's in linear time so that everything doesn't happen at the same time, so we can have experience. We spoke on that, to that pillar. But the energy of everything is such, again, a sacred thing, because your communication and contact and context within yourself and your cells determines your entire life, right? So how you understand it feels and needs to be quite different for every person breathing, right? But everyone holds it from that first breath, if not before, for the 9-10 months that they're in utero. Then they have their first breath, and then it's a determiner, isn't it? How's their energy doing? How's it in motion through their life?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, the line, the linear time. And you keep talking about the spiral. I think physicists are trying to understand too the multidimensional aspect of energy, time and space. The idea too that we have currency. So the energy is a currency for us, which comes back to time. In the last episode we talked about, you explained the allocation of time.
Mm. And with energy, the allocation is, rather than, with time, it has that beginning in a body and an ending on your last breath out of a body. With energy, it's something that's why it's so important to be current, to be in the frequency of the now, right? Because that's, as we speak about with time, the only place where anything changes is now. Can't change the past, can't change the future, but you can determine it by where your attention goes. That's where the energy flows, whatever you focus on. So I say to my men sometimes when they're grappling with this, imagine that you're at Bunnings and there's a warehouse and I'm rolling the roller door up and I've got one of those spotlights on your forehead. Wherever you focus is going to be where your energy goes. That's where you can determine what comes back to you, right? So you look in that direction, that's what's going to have the impetus in your life. And then there's all these other places that you don't look. And that's fine. No one knows everything all of the time. You just have to feel, and that's where the frequency is. That's where the energy is. That's why it's such a sacred thing.
It's a great discussion, and we should do a whole series on energy, right? Not just one podcast. I say that after every podcast. There's a whole series in this. Belinda Jane, I think we've run out of time on this one. I have mixed feelings about the next one.
I know you do.
The next one, so
it's my favourite part, and that's why you leave the best till last, Ronnie.
Love, yeah. Okay. I don't know what to say about that. We'll talk about it in the next one. So so I have so many.
Look at you, speechless! Yay!
All right, cut. See you next week. No, as a God particle in me thanks the God particle in me, honours the God particle.
Back at you, brother.
Namaste.
Namaste.
All right, that's it.
Oh, so good.